presentation, so I don't know if they're going to do that tonight. Did your electrics survive?
Well, the best one, my 66 Strat, needs some work, but it did.
Good.
And you know what? It's weird. It's like smoke. Touching it.
Really?
No, I like it.
Yeah.
No, I
Oh, that's what you
swear.
mean. Oh, yeah, it's got a good look.
No, like it's like it's not white, it's yellow. It plays the same.
That's great.
Derek, it got mojo. It got more mojo. But the Martin, the bridge lifted from the
Yeah. So it needs a setup.
I'm taking that to a Martin guy.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Someone local?
Well, they moved to Williamsburg.
Okay.
His name is Flip Sister. Mine's a 63.
Project. We saw where that goes, but like gloves and hats and stuff and scarves. We've brought in like a huge bag. I didn't know where she should put it, so we just put it on.
So there's a relationship there.
Gotta see him.
Yeah.
How are you?
Nothing really damaged.
That's good.
Very lucky.
Shabbat Shalom. We can welcome everybody onto the screen now for those who are joining us virtually. Welcome. And on your way in, hopefully you grabbed one of these prayer books. For those who are joining us virtually, you'll see the prayer book link is being put into the chat. We're going to be beginning with the words of Shalom Aleichem, which if you want to follow along, you can find on page 24.
I never remember to acknowledge our beautiful band in the moment, so I want to remember right now that we're always so grateful the last Shabbat of every month that our communal band comes forward. If you play a musical instrument and you want to be part of our band, let the last Shabbat of every month, you are welcome. Just chat with me about it briefly and we will hook you up. We begin on page, did you already say this, Rabbi? Of course you did.
Page 24.
Page 24. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Ami Melech, Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Leshalom, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Ami Melech, Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni, Baruchuni, Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitchem l'shalom.
Let's hear you say it.
Tzeitchem l'shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I have to say, this is maybe my favorite Shabbat of the month, always. The sound of the drum behind us, the sound of the guitars, the piano all intermixed together means that our worship isn't just our words, and it's not just the regular keva. It's not what we are used to, the fixed part of our service. But the music elevates what is called our kavanah, our intention, the special sauce that we bring to a prayer service that elevates it for us. And so tonight, as we hear the sound of the music, let it elevate you. Let it ignite your soul. Let it inform you. Let it reach out and let it touch your soul. Shabbat is a time to rediscover things that we often don't leave time for, one of which is an appreciation of music. And so with that, we're going to move into formally ushering in Shabbat as we prepare to light our candles and bless our wine tonight. We're going to be on page 2 for the candle lighting, moving eventually to page number 5. And in honor of them becoming B'nai Mitzvah tomorrow in 2 separate ceremonies, I want to invite Quinn and his family and Ella and her family up to lead us in those blessings.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
So Quinn and Ella, if you want to come on over here. And lift up your cups, and whenever you're ready. I'll hold the mic for you guys.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotah v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinhilanu zikaron l'ma'aseh Bereshit ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim
Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon inachaltanu.
Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Take a sip. Go for it.
L'chaim.
All right.
It's like our fun little sadistic Ner Tamid thing. Well done. Go ahead and find your seat. Shabbat Shalom. Right. We continue our service together. Page 20. Mwah. Mazal Tov. נקבלה, שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, ישמענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ותפארת ולתחילה, לך דודי, תקרא קלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי, תקרא קלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה.
Let's hear you. לך דודי,
לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Verse 5, התעוררי, כי באורך ומיורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה, לך דודי, תקרא קלה, בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי, תקרא קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. If you're able
We
to
rise
rise.
together.
בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, לך דודי, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
We remain standing, page 28.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני
המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם
ברכו
את אדוני המבורך.
We can be seated together. We join together now. We're on page 31. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars, creator of the tide of time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch ata Adonai, ha'ma'ariv, aravim.
Amen.
Page 32.
אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, נגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר, אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Take a moment to be quiet after that beautiful sound vibrating through the room, to really deeply listen. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Together.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. We're on page 40 as we join together in that special song the Israelites sang as they crossed the sea, Mi Chamocha.
Ya ila 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 la ila la, ya ila 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 la ila la, ya la ila la ila ya la ya la la ya ila ya la la. Here we go. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Join together. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך, וכיים לפני משה ומרים. זה אלי, אנו ואמרו, זה אלי, אנו ואמרו.
Let's hear you.
אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. One more time. On yai, 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 ya ila ya ila ya la ya ya la la ya ya ila ya ila la ya la la ya la la ya la la.
We're on page 42, Hashkivenu. Turn your attention to the screen as well.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu lishalom v'hamidenu shom shomereinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu lishalom v'hamidenu shomereinu lechaim. Ushmur tzedkeinu ufaynu l'chaim u'l'shalom me'ata v'ad olam. Sometimes I lay under the moon and I thank God I'm breathing, and I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds me, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for, that the people will say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, no more war. And our children will pray one day, 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 one day. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomereinu l'chaim. Baruch ata Adonai הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
We're on page 44, so we join together in the singing of Yismechu.
ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. מקדשי שבי שבת כולם ישמחו ויתעלו מטובך שבת.
Let's hear you. ישמחו
במלכותך ושומרי שומרי שומרי שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך ושומרי שומרי שומרי שבת וקורא עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשו שבת. מעמדות ימים אותו קראת שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג 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 שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג עונג שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. למעשה בראשית שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג עונג שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת מקורא וקורא עונג שבת.
We move now to page 46, and after this opening meditation, asking God to open up our lips that we might declare God's praise, we'll move in silence through page 64, either praying the traditional words on the page or the words of our heart. We rise together, page 46.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
So for those who are still praying at home or in the Zoomiverse or YouTubeverse, wherever you are, we invite you to allow your prayers to continue as long as they feel they must, they need, and we will keep riding in that holiness with you as we lift up together these words for peace, page 60. This prayer, that we may know abundant peace. To all those who seek and wrestle to understand you, God. To all those who seek to understand how to live in peace. Yeah. Let's go for it. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amecha Tasim. You thought I was singing something else, didn't you? Did you think we were singing something else? What? Shalom Rav? Shalom Rav? was my kavanah leading into it for sure. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amecha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha tasim leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol shalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha tasim leolam. V'tov beinecha livarech et Amecha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם, תשים בעולם.
At this point in our service, we turn to page 253 as we have this opportunity each time we gather together to offer a prayer for those in need of healing, a mishaberach. I'm going to ask you to keep those people's names in your hearts and minds, and when I look around the room, you can say them out loud, as well as the folks on Zoom can put the names in the chat, and then we'll chant together. Mishaberach avotenu v'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et hacholim. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. I ask for those names now. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach avotenu mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to just reset this space for about 1 second. And as I do, it's my pleasure to call up our own Jody Rudorin to tell us a little bit about the trip that she just went on.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I'm going to turn you up just a little bit.
Welcome to Fresh Hate.
Yes.
I love to have the inside jokes for those who made it to the spiel last week.
Yeah.
You can't hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, of course.
Just turned you up.
Maybe Mark should say it.
So welcome.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. So, Jody, you now are back from your whirlwind 36 hours at the Ukrainian border in Poland. And why don't we start, because we're going to be in conversation tonight, with just you giving broad strokes. Like, what did the 36 hours broadly look like? What was your itinerary? What did you do?
Yeah, so I should start by saying I think we were at the actual border for like 1 hour. So I am not the world's expert on the Ukrainian border and the Ukraine crisis and the refugee. I mean, I'm the editor-in-chief of The Forward, as many of you know. We've been covering the Jewish angles on the Ukrainian crisis since the war broke out. And last week, I started to notice in my email inbox and on my Facebook feed, like all these rabbis and Jewish leaders seem to be rushing to the border on these humanitarian missions. And I started to think, like, maybe I should tag along. It just seemed like both an opportunity to see what was going on there and to really understand what the rabbis and the Jewish nonprofit leaders who were going were up to. And so I decided to tag along on a trip that was run by the Jewish Federations of North America, the umbrella group for all the federations. It was their second of 4 planned trips this month. Each of them are like 36 hours. So I left on a plane from JFK at 11:40 p.m., landed in Warsaw Monday afternoon. The group all met in the lobby of the Westin Hotel, where we were staying in Warsaw. Not exactly, pretty comfortable digs. Yes. I did not bring deep boots for this reporting trip. Anyway, we met in the lobby, and the first thing we did was we went to one of 4 hotels in Warsaw that the Jewish Agency for Israel is operating as kind of refugee centers and shelters. So far, as you know, 2 million refugees have come into Poland out of about 3.5 million that have left the country. A lot of other people are displaced. You've heard higher numbers of Ukrainians that are displaced. Up to half the children in Ukraine are estimated to be displaced, but many of them are within the country. Something like 200,000 Ukrainians are Jewish or qualify for Aliyah under the law of return. I guess this is a little more detail than you wanted in the broad strokes. I'm sorry. I'll go back to broad strokes. Yeah. Anyway, so as immigrants pour over, one of their options is to make Aliyah. They are automatically eligible for Aliyah. The Jewish Agency for Israel is kind of looking around to see who's interested in Aliyah. And they say that so far of the Ukrainian Jews they're meeting, about 40% who are coming in, not just to Poland, but all over the region, are headed to Israel. So those who want to go to Israel end up staying in one of these 4 hotels, and it sometimes takes a few days to get all their papers in order, but they're being sent on flights to Israel. So we went to one of those hotels where we met with a couple refugees and a bunch of people doing this work of working with them and who'd been with them for anywhere from days to weeks, and also with a couple of Israeli doctors who were on shifts of coming in to treat the refugees. There was a pediatrician and an ER doc. Anyway, so we were there for maybe 2 hours, and then we went back to the hotel where we had a very nice dinner, and we had some briefings by people who had been working there longer than our 36 hours. The chief rabbi of Poland, the head of Hillel Poland, who a year ago married the chief rabbi of Poland. Interesting. Big age spread. Anyway, interesting. I haven't written about that yet. And someone from the Israeli embassy or consulate, I forget which, in Warsaw. And they gave us kind of these overview briefings. So then the next morning we had wake up calls at 4:45. Which was 11:45 here, not exactly the perfect, but anyway, I seem to have managed to have no jet lag. Anyway, bus at 5:30, and we headed out to Lublin, which is like a 2-3 hour drive, a city much closer to the border. And there we went to a hotel that is also a synagogue and is in the house of a former yeshiva, very strange little mix of place. That was now being operated by the Joint Distribution Committee as a refugee center. And we met with a bunch of refugees there and heard their stories for a couple of hours. And also the people who had brought medicine and clothes dropped them there. There was, in the basement, they were operating like a distribution center for goods, you know, and they were sorting the goods and whatever. So every day at 10 o'clock, they could, anybody could come and get. So the people being housed there were basically Jewish. The people coming to the donation center were anybody. And I'll say, we'll get to more of this, of the this big picture of it wasn't crowded. It wasn't crowded or busy when we were there. In this hotel, they had a capacity for like 150, and they had 56 people staying there that night. So they were much lower than they'd been a week before. And we left there right around 10 when the donation center was about to open, and there was not some crowd of people in the parking lot waiting to get in. So one of my impressions overall is it's not a very visible crisis throughout Poland. Even when we got to the border itself, it had slowed significantly, and it's unclear to me where all these people have gone exactly. They've been absorbed into, I think, a lot of one-on-one situations, and part of that is
people staying with cousins,
yes,
and
exactly,
aunts and uncles, and things
and
like
it's
that.
a sign. One of the things we can talk about in a minute, but it's just like it's a very middle-class refugee crisis, and I think that's part of why. So after Lublin, we got back on the road, went towards the border. And got to the border itself. We went to the crossing at Medica. There was some controversy about whether it's Medica or Medica, but whatever. That's the largest of Poland's crossing points into Ukraine. There are 9 of them across the border. And we went and met again with more people from the Joint Distribution Committee and the Jewish Agency and walked through this kind of, there's like a little bit of a gauntlet of humanitarian aid tents that are leading up to the border, or leading out from the border, I guess, if you're a refugee. And then we got to this fence behind which there's a brick path that goes about, and it actually turns out, it seems like we're at the border crossing. It turns out the border crossing is a mile the other way. So a kilometer the other way. So the last kilometer we saw people walking, accompanied by aid workers and with their stuff in shopping carts that the aid workers had provided. That's their last kilometer, but it's really already in Poland. At that crossing point, the first 3 tents were the Jewish Agency, the JDC, and Hatzolah Without Borders, which is an emergency aid group from Israel. And there were like 2 big Israeli flags there. So the very first thing Ukrainian refugees crossing at Medica see are 2 big Israeli flags and these aid workers ready to help Jewish refugees in particular. We asked how they got the prime real estate, and they said, you know, we're Israeli. That's kind of what they did. So, okay, so finishing the itinerary, and then we can get into it. But so then we actually flew back from the border, from a surprisingly large border airport, got to Warsaw, had a debriefing among the group itself. The group was 30 people, 6 staff from the central office of JFNA, 6 CEOs of federations around the country, including...
JFNA is the National Federation Organization, for those who don't know.
Thank you. One of whom was... Sure, but just figure only 1 in 3 words are really worth it anyway, but yes, sure. Oh, look, Heyman and Zarish are here. We could do our whole scene.
Yeah, so you just, when you turn, the mic has to turn.
I'm sorry. I don't usually need a mic. So anyway, okay. Where were we? We were getting back to Warsaw. I was telling you about the group. 6 staff members, I think, from the central office, 6 CEOs from around the country of individual federations, including the North Jersey one, which I think is Tenafly area. And the rest were basically lay leaders of federation, people who had been on the board, people who, one woman ran the Women's National Philanthropy Division, she was the chair of it, and several of them had particular reasons to feel called to this trip. Some of them were sort of former big machers in Federation, but they had a particular thing about Ukraine, including a woman who had grown up in Kyiv and had left in 1989. So they had a kind of a debriefing in which they talked about like what should Federation do, what they'd seen, long-term strategy, and that was the end of that. And then that was a long day. And then the next morning, my flight wasn't till 4, so we did a couple more things just on our own. I had been to Poland myself in 1987 on one of those very early teenage go to death camps and then to Israel missions. Some are fun. No, it was a profound shaping experience. And one of the things I had remembered about Warsaw is they had taken us to this place called the Umschlagplatz, which I think literally means like the place that things leave or something. It was a train depot from which 300,000 Jews had been taken to Majdanek, which was a death camp. To Majdanek or Treblinka? I'm suddenly losing that. Do you know?
Majdanek is the death camp.
They both?
Yeah, I guess they both
anyway,
are.
I'll file a correction if I'm wrong. Sorry, I believe it is Majdanek. And when we had gone in 1987, there was a gas station there, like on the site. And there was this tiny little plaque, and we were all quite horrified by that. And that's one of the things that has really stuck in my mind for all of these years. And so I was like, I want to go. I had heard there was a memorial there. I want to go and see the difference. And what was interesting, so we went down there, we took a walk there, we got quite lost. So it was a much longer walk, which was pretty interesting because the Westin and this whole area of skyscrapers that they now call Little Manhattan is actually in the Warsaw Ghetto, in the former Warsaw Ghetto. So which is like fine, it's like in the center of the city. And if those of you who have been there, there are several places that the ghetto wall is still standing and is exposed, and they have kind of plaques and explanations up there. So just a few minutes from the Westin, we saw the first one of those. And then we walked a little bit on this trail that they've constructed around the city that includes monuments to the leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and those of you who've read the Leon Uris book, Mila 18, so that's marked on this trail. And there's a big, I didn't go into the museum, but there's a museum of Polish Jewish history there. And then you get to the Umschlagplatz, which is really quite a beautiful, very peaceful kind of square memorial that you could kind of sit inside. On the wall they have, so I said 300,000 people were taken to their death from there. I believe they have 300 typical Polish Jewish names from A to Z, just first names to just kind of represent who those people might have been. There's a kind of split in the gray stone. It sort of looks like a tombstone, and then behind it is a tree that's supposed to represent new life there. So the memorial was built in 1988, which was 1 year after I was there. So it's not like in 35 years, things have changed. Actually, it changed the next year, but that was sort of a thing that I wanted to see. So we did that, and then we went, a lot of people had been visiting the train station. There are refugees kind of really throughout Europe, I think, going through train stations. And at the central train station, various people in our group who had come early we wanted to just go there and interact with, just see what that operation was like. There were a lot of aid people who were there. Our guide had told us that the whole operation had moved to the eastern train station, so we went there instead, where nothing was happening at all. A charity has built these huge, like, humanitarian tents, or huge tents that they are gonna create shelters and services in, but none of that had started yet. And by the time that was done, we were too late to go to the central train station, so we went to a kosher restaurant called B'Kaif that is like, serves really good Israeli food, and down the street from them, there are some ghetto walls that are inside of an apartment building, which seemed to me to be the ultimate in exposed brick loft decor. And then we left.
Okay.
That's my overview.
The
Do you have
overview.
any time left?
Yes.
Sorry.
We have 15 more minutes.
It
so
took
we're good.
36 hours for me to tell that story.
So I'm curious, as you were seeing things, you mentioned that the big difference between this humanitarian crisis and other refugee crises is that this one tends to be a middle-class one. In part, I imagine, because if you have less money, you're probably less able to leave and to flee. I'm curious how that changes things based on what you saw, and also if you have like a moment in time that really pulled on your heartstrings when you were there.
Well, why don't I start with that one? And some of you may have already sort of seen this because I wrote about it a couple days ago in the foreword. So in Lublin, this whole thing was a little awkward for me. I mean, I'm used to, as a reporter, trying to hang out with people and get them kind of in their natural, comfortable setting, really in conversation. And this was a semicircle of 6 people, kind of each standing up in a very performative way to tell their story with like 30 people holding their iPhones in their faces. And it didn't feel, and I didn't have a lot of ability to guide the conversation. So it wasn't the greatest situation for me to get what felt like authentic and kind of different from what you've already heard refugee stories. So I was, as I said, almost watching the operation as much as reporting. But so we did have this semicircle and it was in this synagogue setting within this hotel. So a couple different people went and spoke. And at the end of the semicircle was sitting a woman in her 40s and a teenage girl. And the teenage girl most people seemed to be wearing, clothes that had been donated, and she was in kind of a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt and gray sweatpants. And she just was like, she had her arms crossed and her legs crossed and was looking down and, seemed pretty traumatized and just really uncomfortable. And her mother, so there was like maybe 4 people who spoke before, and then her mother stood up to speak, and the first thing she said was, "I'm not going to talk about the war. I'm sorry, I can't talk about the war. I've been having nightmares." And I was sort of thinking, like, well, what's she going to talk about, And then she just started and spilled their whole story, just a really detailed version. They lived in Kyiv, and they had moved. They had gotten out actually relatively quickly. It turned out they had been in this hotel for 17 days. And kind of like maybe 10 minutes in, the girl was still like not looking at her mother, looking down, seeming really, really uncomfortable. And then the mom said this thing about how when she got really worried about her daughter was when she put down her paintbrushes. And she talked about that, then the girl stood up and said that she was a painter and how important it was to her to paint. And this was particularly resonant for me because my own kids are just a little younger than Sophia, this girl. And many of you know Shayna is also an artist, my daughter. And so it was like, wow, this is really close to home, And so as soon as her mom talked about painting and then she talked about painting, she got up and said, "I'm a painter." And she really identified that way. She's a very young woman, young girl. And then she said that she had started to paint again 3 days before, and did we want to see what she had made? And of course we all were like, yes, we want to see what you've made. And so she went and got her painting, and she came back and explained the painting to us, and was really like suddenly awake and alive in a way that was kind of new and was thinking about what the next chapter would be. Her mom had said...
And what was the painting of? Did it have anything to do with the experience?
Yeah, so the painting, I didn't love the way I described it in the piece. I feel like I should have brought a picture of it. So it's a very kind of like cartoonish, but I think in that sophisticated, I'm sure it's not anime style, but like some kind of very angled and it's of a teenage girl. It's all in reds. And she referred to it as a character. She said, "I made this character," and the hands and feet have I don't know exactly what, I think they turn into either animals or plants or something. And there's a teddy bear in the picture. There's a teddy bear in the picture. Sorry. And when she talked about it, she said that she was inspired by the little kids that she had seen in the refugee center, the hotel, and that it was really about that the smoke in the picture represented hope, and that there should be hope, and that all kids, and that she had drawn this teddy bear because all any of these kids really wanted was a toy, and why they didn't understand why they couldn't have one now.
I'm curious, you mentioned hope. What was the primary feeling among any refugees that you met? Was it one of fear? Was it one of anger? Was it one of hope? Or was it really dependent on who you met and where you met them?
I mean, again, I just want to be really careful about generalizing because I didn't do enough reporting or enough kind of free-ranging reporting to feel confident that anything I saw was representative of anything else. But I would say, if I had to say what the connective tissue among the people I saw was this kind of, was it a kind of traumatization? Is that a word? A sense of, of still a little bit of shock. A lot of what we heard was their description of what was happening in their city, what the trigger point was that had made them leave, and then that harrowing process of getting out. They were in very comfortable and safe environments. Like when we first got to the hotel in Lublin, they brought us into this sort of breakfast buffet that would look very familiar from any like Israeli hotel or European hotel you've stayed in. It was a very nice buffet, fresh fruit, smoked salmon, yogurts, whatever. And it was unclear at first. We were like, are those people, the people sitting in the cafe, refugees or workers or people staying in the hotel? And that's where they're staying, is in kind of nice hotels. So they were comfortable and clean and coiffed and just looked a little like sad and shocked. I will say, one of the first people we met in Warsaw who was on his way to Israel. So he and his wife were retired. They had a daughter who already had made Aliyah and lived in Israel. And their house, they were staying in a country house outside of Kyiv where they had moved during COVID. They'd been there like for months. And it was relatively free of shelling until it wasn't. And their house was hit and caught fire and everything burned down. So they thought about going back to Kyiv to get things like their passports or other copies or whatever of their documents, but they didn't. And when they got to Lviv, they were like, we don't have anything. And like through some stroke of very good luck, they had been enrolled, or maybe it's not good luck. I mean, so the Joint Distribution Center has been super active in Ukraine for the last number of years. They had, one of the stats they told us was they had a database of 37,000 Ukrainian Jews who were involved in some program. I forget what it was. So they had records of that many people. And this couple had done something with the Joint, and for some reason they had copies of all their documents. So they were able to basically retrieve their documents in Lviv from those copies and then get to Warsaw and make their way. So that guy, when he talked, and then he ended his talk with saying like, and I don't know if he said, I forget exactly, he said God willing, but he was like, and tomorrow we'll be on a flight to Israel, and he seemed very relieved and hopeful. And the whole room of these like Jewish activists were like, it's like the best thing that ever so there was that. But like Sophia and her mom were just starting to leave the hotel and walk around Lublin and think about getting a job or going to school. I mean, they were definitely in this kind of trauma moment.
And so it sounds like because this is potentially going to go on for a while, those few refugees that you really got a chance to interact with are beginning to almost put down semi-temporary roots in the new places that they are because they don't expect to go home tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, those two examples I just gave you are probably really anomalous because Sophia, Irina, her mother is not married and doesn't have parents and has nobody back in Ukraine. So it's her 15-year-old daughter, and their dog who's with them. And so they're ready. Yeah, they're not thinking about going back. And that other couple's retired, older, 70s, and has a daughter already in Israel. I did meet this young woman at the border. I only talked to her for a minute. Her name was Lila, and she said she was an actress, but then she said she worked in marionette theater. So I don't know if that makes her like a marionettist. But I was totally confused by her. So
maybe she was like in Avenue Q and she could be both or something like that.
Yeah. So when we got to the border, a number of people had these like Ukrainian flags draped on their shoulders, and I was sort of, I don't know what's going on there. And she was one of them. And I think the aid workers were giving refugees them. So I was standing with her trying to talk to her. She spoke pretty good English, and she kind of asked this aid tent person, like, is it okay if I have some water? Which seemed really weird to me. Like, you've just gotten out of Ukraine, you can have whatever you want. And then I talked to her for a couple minutes, and I really couldn't follow it, but I finally got it. So she's from Kharkiv, where her father still is. She had left with her mother, who was not well, gotten her to Lviv. And now she was coming every day to the border crossing to translate for refugees and going back.
Wow.
She was like 30 years old. So I was like, oh, that's a thing. So
Yeah.
she's not leaving.
It seems that, I mean, at least when watching the news and what you're saying is that everybody's trying to do their little bit if they can. She's translating, rock bands are serving in the army, that this is the Ukrainian people are trying to do what they can.
Yes.
I have two more questions for you because I know we're getting toward the end of our half hour. And then because we do have people who are here specifically for the service, we aren't going to take questions, but you can feel free. You're hanging around afterwards, so you can talk to Jody after. The first question I have is, the Forward just published a really provocative article, and you made reference to it in your column today, on the debate that is going on in the Jewish world about whether people should go to the border and on these kinds of missions. Now that you've been on a mission, I'm curious, what is your view on that question?
Yeah, so, and the core of that debate, as I understand it, but you may know it better, is, are people going there taking up precious resources that would be better spent on the refugees themselves? Resources like translators, hotel rooms, transportation, clogging the roads, et cetera. Like, that's the main thing. And for what? Like, are they basically doing it for photo ops or fundraising opportunities or whatever?
Or to be witnesses, as you are to us tonight, right?
Well, so the flip side of the argument is that firsthand experience is the two sides, right? Some people are going to actually do something and help. So there's, they think is that better than giving money to a group that's more organized than whatever you could do personally? I don't know, discuss. The second part of the argument, which I've heard many rabbis make in particular, but I think was also resonant for the Federation folks, is we go and we come back and we talk about it in a more compelling way than you can from watching the news. We bring back firsthand experiences, the stories, and so that's the debate. And I was glad to not have to make the moral choice and to think, well, what I should do is go report on the people who are going, because I felt that was an important part of what was
reporting is a different kind of
going on in the American Jewish world. Anyway, here's what I found: it wasn't that busy. It just wasn't. There was no way to feel like the resources we were taking up were starving anyone of resources. Everywhere we went was kind of quiet and calm and not crowded, and none of the people who were, I have been with aid workers who are squeezing 2 minutes in for me while they have cell phone calls coming in on 3 different lines, and those calls are really, really urgent. That was not happening with the people we were talking to. At the border itself, a week ago, there had been, that whole kilometer I talked about had been a wall of people. When we were there, it was one crossing every 3 or 4 minutes. There were many more aid workers than refugees when we were there. There was there was no traffic anywhere. In Warsaw, this is one of the mysteries to me, because when I covered the Syrian refugees in Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan, even Amman, the capital city that's very far from where the refugee was, sort of filled with refugees and aid workers, and it was crowded everywhere. It's not crowded in Warsaw. It was not crowded in Lublin. People were not rushing up to these centers. I think these 2 million people that have come in have been absorbed or scattered throughout Poland and beyond into Europe.
And if you have resources, you can go further. I remember reading a testimonial from the first of the rabbinic missions that I saw, which was 17 rabbis from the New York City area. And one of the rabbis said, I've never been so happy to have my plane delayed, because on the plane back to the United States, they actually delayed the plane because they were figuring out some last-minute paperwork for a number of refugees that were on their flight back to the United States at the time. So if you are middle class, if you're upper middle class, if you're upper class, and you have fled your home, you could find yourself anywhere in the world in a way that people, let's say in Syria, who may not have had those resources, couldn't do.
100%. And I think what also that means is it just spreads out very quickly. So we learned that before the war, there were 1.5 million Ukrainians already living in Poland. So you can imagine many of these people went to stay with those people. Our Polish guide had a best friend who had her son's apartment, so somebody staying there. the CEO of the Federation in Atlanta almost got hit by a bicyclist and took the guy out for coffee. He has somebody staying with them. So they're all dispersed out, staying in other people's middle-class homes, and then, yes, going on to friends and family elsewhere. So what was interesting to me was I might have expected, like, the flight to be crowded also with refugees, the Westin to be crowded also, the streets to be, it just wasn't crowded. Like, it wasn't busy or crowded. And I don't fully understand that, but I think it's, but it did make me feel not at all bad about having the translators.
A month is a long time in a crisis.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people came over, so I think until there's fresh bombings in new places, I think we may have a pause in the flood.
Good. So, and as there should be. So one final question. I got in touch today with Mikey Sherrill's office because I just wanted to know, like, are there refugees coming to the area? What can we do, right? We've got a team of people in our congregation who actually have settled a family from Afghanistan, and that's an important part of the social justice work that we do, and we're gonna do that when we can have access to refugees who need help coming here. And what Jill told me, Jill, a member of our congregation and the district director of Mikey's office, she said basically, like, there's not anything right now. Like, there's no kind of flood of people coming here. In part, I think because the gates haven't fully opened, there's not the program. I think it's just cleared for 100,000 refugees to come to the United States. I'm curious, what, short of doing that, which is in our backyard, and short of giving money, which is really important, what else can we be doing here in the congregation to make a difference?
I mean, such a good question, and it was the focus of the kind of Tuesday night debrief for these leaders to talk about what they wanted their organizations to do. And, they talked about kind of 4 streams of things to think about. I think I'm not going to answer your question as action-oriented as you'd like. But so one is, there is going to be need to continue to support all the border countries, right? There's going to be a lot of stress and pressure on Poland, Hungary, Moldova, Romania, and there'll be some stuff that needs to happen, especially within those Jewish communities that, have been just kind of built up in the last 10 or 20 years. So that's mostly probably about giving money, but that's one focus. The second is there's going to be all these people going to Israel, and that's going to be those people. So that's more money giving, I guess. And then they were talking very much about this what would North American Jews do to be part of the refugee first policy push in North America, and then potential resettlement. But I mean, and they actually also talked about they had a pilot program resettling Afghan refugees, and could we replicate that for larger numbers of Ukrainian refugees? That seems like a great idea to me, and for synagogues and churches and mosques to be part of that effort, because I think we know that refugees, that a group supporting a family with different kinds of services really is effective. I wonder, though, like, if the ones who come here are going to be people who have connections to family or friends already in Ukraine and who have educational resources to get jobs pretty quickly. Like, I'm not sure that they're going to need the same kind of support that Syrians or Afghans needed when they resettled. So, I mean, they may go mostly to places that have big Ukrainian communities.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from when I visited Ukraine in 2007, 2008, there were a very sizable number of people within the Jewish community that I met that could speak English with me. So if you're going to come to the United States, the most important resource you have is the ability to speak English.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Anyway, the fourth piece of what they were talking about, which I hadn't thought much about yet, but we've started to see in the news, is the Jews that are still in Russia. So there's like 3 times as many Jews in Russia, about 600,000, as there are in Ukraine, were in Ukraine. And we've seen numbers, people have been reaching out for Aliyah permission from Russia, and we know about the various ways that Putin's regime is tracking down on free press already and free expression, so religion can't be far behind that. So there was a big discussion in this federation group about, let's not, if the Iron Curtain is going to fall again, we can't take 50 years to get people out. And so I think there's going to be an increased focus on how to support Russian Jews and to either be protected in Russia or to get out. And that may be something that will require more activism and also potentially, I guess, just humanitarian aid at some point, either here or in Israel. So those were the things people talked about. I mean, somebody had emailed me this afternoon about, like, I want to go volunteer at the border. And I don't know what to, I don't know what to say about whether that's like a good idea or exactly how to do it. One of the guys on the trip had wanted to also do that, and he said he called around to the organizations in advance, and it was similar to the rabbi discussion, the debate, because they said to him, are you a doctor? No. Do you speak Polish? No. Do you speak Ukrainian? No. Do you speak Russian? No. They're like, we don't need you. No thanks. He finally got a gig hanging out with these Israeli medical clowns that have been working on the border. He made a deal with them that if he brought them...
They were actual clowns. She's not being disparaging.
Oh, no, actually clowns. Yeah, they're trained medical, like, support clowns. And they'd... This is a thing. An old colleague of mine from the New York Times is married to a Lebanese medical clown, just so you know. Anyway, so they have them in many countries. Anyway, they made a deal with him that if he brought them a bunch of toys, they would let him hang out with them for the day. And so he stayed at the border and spent the day with them on Wednesday. And there's a video of them in my newsletter today, if you would like to see it.
Thank you. So thank you for adding your perspective tonight. And as we said before, first of all, it's a gift to have you in this congregation, and so wonderful that
Welcome back to Fresh Eight.
Yes, that you could. We hatched this plan, by the way, at post spiel waffle fries with the cast.
That is
afterwards.
not true.
No?
It's not true. You did not ask me until like Tuesday when you texted me and said, would you speak on Friday night?
I was there and I said to you, you'll do something at the synagogue, and you said yes. And then on Tuesday, I locked you in for this date.
Yeah, right. I said I would do something sometime.
Yeah.
I didn't say like 2 days after I got back.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. But secondly, what you've done more than anything else is you've become that witness that we talked about. And so what I would say to everybody who's assembled here is that you don't necessarily have to go to the border to be a witness, but numbers are not witnesses. 2 million people, 3 million people, that is not witnessing. Witnessing is reading Jody's column about the girl who paints. Witnessing is reading the media and finding a story that pulls on your heartstrings, finding a video that pulls on your heartstrings, and using that as a way to galvanize support and break open people's hearts.
So I'm sorry, but I want to jump in just because, the concept of bearing witness is huge for me. It is a driving principle of journalism. And, as some of you know, I was stationed abroad in Jerusalem for the New York Times for a few years. I covered 2 wars there, as well as the refugee crisis, as I said, in Syria. And that kind of bearing witness that involves like really deep firsthand reporting and risk, real risk of reporting on conflicts and danger. Like, that's happening today all over Ukraine and the region. That is not what I was doing. I don't want to, but really, what the rabbi just said is just so important, like being real patrons of that risky journalism, which is such a hallmark of our democracy, that we have people who can be freely reporting on the toughest stories in the world and bringing them back to you. Like, read them, share them on your social media pages, and email them around to your friends. The way you can support, like, the idea of bearing, I agree that reading and consuming that is bearing witness, but you need to support the idea of having people who take risks and earn a living, bearing witness in a real way, in a real meaningful way. So
thank you, Jody. Thank you. So we're going to move now into the conclusion of our service, and I'll invite us to rise as we turn to page 282 for Elena.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
We're seated together. We turn now to page 294, and we think of those who we've loved and who we've lost. As I recite the name of your loved one, I'll invite you to rise and to honor their memory, knowing, of course, that you can rise for anyone, whether it's a family member or a friend, someone close or an acquaintance. Honoring their memory is for everyone. This Shabbat, we remember Milton Book, Irma Clayman, Manis Cohn, Louis Gash, Ida Gelb, Murray Gottesman, Joseph Gross, Solomon Haas, Benjamin Herwood, Rose Katowitz, Bernard Kirschenbaum, Gloria Kersner, Bess Leopold, Jerry Lindell, Ludwig Seaman, Ruth Saperstein, Herbert Schreiber, Sarah Seidel, Alvin Shakin, Norma Siegel, Bessie Solomon, Adrian Clem Taylor, and Gwen Wurtzel. And those who are in Shiva and Shloshim periods of mourning, Andrew Nam, father of Whitney Pollack, Lenny DeCamp, aunt of Johanna Rosenfield, Sheila Sholak, mother of Mark Sholak, and Athena Ramos, great niece of Amy Karras Plout. In addition, I'll invite you to rise and share the name of anyone who you're observing a yahrzeit for who may not have been on this list. And I'll invite you to rise and share the name of anyone that you are within your 1-year period of mourning for. We turn to page 294 and we rise together. Itgadal v'itgadash shemei Rabbah. B'yamad divrach hirutei b'yamlich malchutei. B'chai echon u'v'yom echon u'v'chai d'chol Beit Israel. B'gala u'v'zman karib v'imru amen. Yehesh mei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah b'richum. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata. Damiram b'yamav v'imru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'arko Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'arko Yisrael v'imru amen. Please be seated. So just a few quick announcements before our closing song. The first, of course, thank you to Jody Radorin for adding her perspective tonight and for her words. Thank you to our band. Tomorrow morning, services are going to be at 10 a.m. for our congregation. That's going to be in the chapel. And I want to wish a congratulations to Quinn and to Ella, who will each be coming B'nai Mitzvah in their own separate ceremony, one at 9:30 and one at 11:30 tomorrow. And so we say thank you for our oneg tonight and congratulations on tomorrow. Do we have any mindfulness or anything tomorrow morning?
Not officially.
Not officially, okay. So, look, there's a ton of stuff happening. We are back programmatically in a way that we haven't been in 2 years, to the extent that we looked at the Igeret and we said, no one's going to read till the end, and the end was only like stuff within the past month or the next month. So we've got so much going on at the congregation. I want to give just a couple quick highlights of some things. The first is the Women's Seder, if you want to give a plug to that.
Sign up. It's on April 7th.
Yes.
You don't want to miss it.
And we also are having the return of our second night Seder here. That's going to be on that Saturday night, I think the 16th at 5:30. In addition, next weekend, I really want to give a big plug for people to come to services on Friday night. We have this Shabbat every year. We call it our membership Shabbat. Basically, it's our membership celebration Shabbat. We buy you dinner. And so come join us. We want to say thank you for being a member here of our congregation. And so come, we'll have a really festive service followed by a really festive dinner afterwards. And we really hope that you can join us for that.
The service will be even more festive somehow.
Yes.
Even more festive if you all come back.
Yes, and we need you to register so we know how much food to get.
We have to say that.
And on the 9th, Saturday the 9th, we have the Havdilin Cafe, which, if you want to explain what that is, Cantor?
So we have our very own Havdilin Cafe creator in the house, Robert Melman over there. The Havdilin Cafe is a Ner Tamid tradition. It has been. This is your sixth time visiting Ner Tamid. An amazing band called the Reticence, and they are particularly hardcore when it comes to Dylan.
Right.
So please come back.
Yes.
Right? It's going to be a very fun night. Everyone is welcome.
So there's no way to do everything justice that's on our eGarret. Go read our website. Go read our eBlast. We will make sure. Yeah.
Oh, it's really tough to remember.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob's Cafe. I will announce it because I've got the mic and people are on. So the day after, so on the 10th, we have the return of Bob's Cafe. For those who don't know, we turn our synagogue into a restaurant, an actual restaurant, food made by congregants, food served by congregants. That's going to be on that Sunday morning, the 10th. Come, eat. We'll seat you at tables with other people for your chance to get to know each other as a community. Also led by our own Jody Radoran. Yes. So with that, because somebody's going to give me another event, and we really got to go eat now, we're going to conclude with Oseh Shalom, call for peace.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.